Okay, guys, the legend, the man, Mr. Rob Hubbard. Okay, hello everyone, I'm Flex. I have the honor to be here talking with the legend himself, Mr. Rob Hubbard. Rob, was that anything you expected?
Not at all, no, it's mind-blowing.
Okay, there's lots and lots of guys there who's been growing with your music, you know. Is there anyone who has never heard of Mr. Rob Hubbard? Who are you? Okay, but hey, at first, to make it clear, this is the hardcore of the Commodore 64 demo scene. There are veterans from the 80s, and like myself, when I was a young kid, I grew up listening to your music. But do you have any idea in how many demo scene products your music has been used?
No, not at all.
Because I made the calculation. It was almost in 7,000 demo productions. Oh man, so that proves that you made an impact.
I think I actually did a couple of demos myself in the 80s as well, so that's 7,002.
Okay, let's count a couple more. But hey, our time is limited anyway. We're going to have some questions from the audience later on. But let's begin from the early years. So what is the basic story in your background? What brought you into computers in the first place, and specifically why composing came that important part?
Have we got 2 days to answer that?
Make it short, please, if you can.
Well, the short story is that working as a musician, all the electronics magazines were saying about computers were going to be the big thing, and I was keen to get into it. And I researched, what machine to buy, and I saved up some money from doing gigs. And the popular machine at the time was the BBC Acorn, which was popular, but I didn't like that. And then Commodore came out with the 64, which had 64K memory. We used to advertise that with an elephant, and it had the SID chip. And so it became a bit of a no-brainer, and I just dived in with a C64. That was my first machine that I basically learned. And I spent many hours till 5 o'clock in the morning struggling to learn the machine, because there was no internet back then. There was no kind of there was no people you could phone up to ask how a non-maskable interrupt worked. You had to try to just figure it out yourself. And through learning software and trying to do a game and writing music, I kind of came to the conclusion the music should be the thing that I should do. I did a few mail outs, and eventually I got a couple of gigs. And then after somewhere around about the thing on a spring period, things started to take off, and that's what I did.
Okay, you pretty much answered the next question, which was about how to learn to program on those days, but it was through trial and error pretty much also.
There was a book called Dr. Watson's 6502 or something like that, which had all weird, non-standard 6502 mnemonics, which I had to unlearn the proper ones. You buy a book on this stuff, and then you figure out, what the instructions do, and try to learn about the stuff. And you start poking bytes into memory at 49152, which I think is C1000, if I remember right. Doing SYS 49152, and then seeing the machine freeze. You know, reload from tape. 2 hours later, having not shot yourself, you do it again. You know.
Okay, but you really had to be a good programmer in those days to actually get anything out from the machine. You had no editors, no one actually had
No.
assembly code, and that was the case.
Yeah, I mean, I remember using Commodore Basic, which is an interpreted language. First thing I did was move a sprite across the screen in Basic, and it just kind of stuttered like that. And then I tried writing some music in Basic, and it sounded like somebody was dyslexic, musically dyslexic or something. Either that or they drank 10 pints of Guinness. It was just staggering, and it was dreadful, you know. So when I put a sprite in machine code, the thing just zipped across the screen. And I thought, okay. And once you figure out what the interrupts are doing, then the floodgates open as to, you know, what you can do when you've got something that's happening, you know, 50 times a second.
So you always coded your own music routines and...
Yeah, there was no tools, you know.
Yeah. How many different versions are there from your music routine? You enhanced it, of course, during the years.
Well, what happened was, from the earlier days, you have a more kind of a basic routine, if you look at some of the earlier tunes, and then things are constantly progressing, so you're always trying to add something and think of something different. You know, you start off at I think I did something called Up and Away or something like that, with really early kind of simple thing, and then you end up with something like arcade classics, which is it's all developed from the earlier routines, you know. But the basic premise is still the same.
Yeah, so you never wrote an editor for your music routines?
No, not at all. The editor was basically what we used to call dot byte statements. So you would put dot byte, and then hexadecimal E3, comma, 07, you know. I used to know all the numbers, so like hexadecimal 34 was a C. The octave above that, I think, was like hexadecimal 40, and then the one above that was 4C, I think. And then, you know, so I used to know all the numbers for the musical pitches.
Yeah, but you have made a lot of long tunes that last many minutes, but how did you keep yourself on track by making that long tunes? What was your method? You always didn't start from the beginning.
Yeah, again. My thinking was that, you know, if you've got a tune that is only like a minute 30 long, it's going to drive people nuts. You know, so it's going to keep repeating, and people are going to say, what the hell is that thing coming out, you know, that music out your bedroom? It's going to drive people mad. So, I mean, my thinking at the time was, I have to write, you know, maybe, you know, 5 different contrasting sections to make it more interesting for people so that they don't get so bored with it. And that's how we kind of, things ended up getting longer and longer.
Okay, then about the game industry, how did you get your first assignment to make music for games?
Well, after I tried doing a game, and didn't turn out very well, and they said I should try to do music, and so I did a mail out. I used to go through all the magazines for what we call software houses. They had like adverts in all the, you know, the Commodore user and all the magazines, and I did a mail out and never got anything. And then I did like cassettes and demos and stuff, And then I was literally on the verge. I was that close to basically saying, okay, I'm going to have to work in a supermarket. And my wife, well, she wasn't my wife at the time, she said, no, just give it one more chance, you know. Okay, I'll do another mail out. And if nothing happens, you know, I'm going to have to, you know, work in a supermarket or something, you know. And I did another mail out, and that's what led to somebody giving me a couple of jobs.
Yeah, okay. I think my mic is a little bit too loud. It's starting to sound bad. Yeah, you can put it a bit down, I guess. But about so-called golden years, you made lots of different kinds of seed music, but what was your inspiration? Kind of, you know, you did listen to some kind of music, you were a fan of some music style which could be heard in your music, or what got you inspired?
I think it was a number of things, and things actually changed. I mean, I was always kind of more interested in trying to do something which suited the game for a start. So if it was more like magical fantasy, I would try to write something. If it was more like a space type of shoot 'em up, I would try to do something a bit more electronic. But then the inspiration kind of changed because the demo scene happened. The demo, you know, like these. I'm not kidding. These crazy guys, man, used to send me a disc from Germany with a hacked game with my music in it, you know, and they're scrolling messages. And, you know, I used to get that stuff sent through the post all the time. But what happened was that I think it inspired a lot of the British game industry at that time, because there was people like Jeff Minter and Andrew Braybrook doing all really crazy stuff. And I think the demos scene inspired a lot of that, and certainly inspired me to want to branch out a lot. So that's how, you know, maybe things like Knuckle Busters happened, because of the demo scene.
Okay. So, how much time did it demand to do a proper soundtrack for a game? Can you tell? Maybe there were some fast ones, and then some soundtracks that took for ages to get finalized. And how was it?
Well, sometimes, you know, I'd maybe spend a couple of days, and then on like a bigger project, I'd maybe spend a couple of weeks. Like the, I think, you know, Delta, which was a Thalamus game, I think was a couple of weeks. I think Dragon's Lair was maybe a couple of weeks. You know, sometimes I'd try to get stuff done within, you know, 2 or 3 days. But I mean, you know, it's not a question of 9 to 5. You know, it was, I mean, I was working a lot of hours, you know. Late nights, you know, getting up. I put in a lot of hours to get that stuff done. It wasn't a case of just working 10 o'clock till 4 o'clock, you know.
Well, that sounds pretty familiar, I would say. And what are your personal favorites from your music, and what do you hate the most?
What do I hate the most?
Yeah.
Oh,
I've heard
God.
some rumors and read some interviews from the internet. I might have a good guess, but please tell us your own words.
I don't know. I mean, I think sometimes, you know, you do something that's really quite inspired, and other times it seems a bit forced. I mean, I never really liked Star Pause very much. You know, that was a bit kind of, wasn't that great, I didn't think. And Eyeball didn't, they wanted that kind of Cabaret Voltaire thing on Eyeball. That's what Gary Liddon kept asking for, and I tried to do it. And I just don't think it turned out very well. I didn't like that. And then there was, when I was at EA, they had this thing about this band called Scritti Politti, which they wanted to something sound like that. And I did a game trying to do that, and that didn't turn out very well either.
So is there any certain favorite out of your collection that you're most satisfied with now, years after?
Oh, I think that's really, really difficult because I tend to change my mind a lot, you know. I mean, you played Shockwave Rider. I hadn't heard that for quite a while. I thought,
is it me?
Yeah, I had Shockwave Rider. I think, was it Shockwave or Shockwave? Something like that. And I thought, oh, that's interesting, you know.
Okay. So you were in contact, obviously, with many other British composers like Martin Galway,
Yeah.
Ben Dalglish.
Yeah.
What was your relationship between each other? Were you friends or rivalries, or what was the spirit?
I think it was everything, you know. We were friends, you know, because we used to hang out, you know, when we met at shows and stuff. But I mean, it was also, you know, a kind of a friendly rivalry, because obviously, you know, for me, I wanted to keep the work coming in. You know, it was starting to get pretty lucrative, and I wanted to keep it going as long as I could. So I was willing to try to do whatever it took to try to maintain that, you know.
Okay. Many of us might remember CompuNet from the mid-80s, 85, 86. Were you at the CompuNet society yourself? And if you were, what was your handle?
Yeah, I was on CompuNet for a while, and there was people like Mighty Bog. Do you remember him? I was on CompuNet for a while until I got my phone bill. And then, you know, I looked at the phone bill, it was 200 quid. So I had to, I put it in the bin after that. I can't deal with that. I mean, how do you explain to your wife or your girlfriend, hang on, I've just spent 200 quid on the phone in a month?
Yeah, but the CompuNet, that was kind of an early society, early internet even, might I say.
Yeah, it was also part of the demo scene as well, because there was, you know, people doing demos as well.
Yes, there were guys like Stoat and Tim, for example.
Stoat and Tim, yeah.
Yeah. Did you have any, or what was your relationship with those guys?
I was pretty friendly with Stoat and Tim. I went down to London and got drunk with them, and I think they did Knuckle Busters.
So was it the kind of first approach to what we now call the demo scene for yourself, the CompuNet times? Or did you know that there is such scene as a cracking scene and the demo scene? And
before CompuNet, yeah, I did, yeah, because like I said, the, you know, crazy guys from Europe used to send me discs.
Yeah, that was so early.
You know, yeah, and so he knew that was happening because they'd do all these, you know, big sprites, scrolling messages, then they'd start the sprites bouncing, they'd get rid of the borders, you know, and all that kind of thing, and people say, how on earth did you do that?
Yeah, but what was your general attitude towards the cracking scene, and did you feel like, you know,
no, I mean,
you are losing something, people don't buy those games, or it didn't matter to you because you got paid? And
I think initially, I think people are annoyed because they're hacking into things. So you know, your first reaction is that you're annoyed about that, and then you think about software piracy, and well, the people who like crack games and pirate games, they're not going to buy the things in any case. So you're not actually losing any money. You know, the you know, because you know they would never buy it in the first place. And then I certainly wasn't, you know, I don't think I wasn't annoyed with it. And in the end, you're kind of very proud of it, because you know you think, wow, this guy's gone to the trouble of, like, you know, putting this scrolling message of like all these different kind of groups that he wants to mention, and said, you know, special mention hi to Robert. Oh, okay, you know.
Yes, and over almost 7,000 products with your music.
Yeah.
Of course, you got lots of name inside this demo scene circle, and absolutely one of the early big names is Rob Hubbard, that I must tell. But then you moved to, okay, some applause, yeah. And next, then you moved to United States, and you worked in electronic arts. This was probably 89 or...
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
So, what did you do there? And you had some game products, and tell us something about those times.
Well, I first went to EA for a couple of months, which was, I think it was in the summer of 1988 or 87, when they said, will you come out for a couple of months? And I said, okay. And that's when I did Skate or Die with the samples. And when I played Skate or Die to the guys at EA, they went nuts, man. And they just said, wow, you want a job? So they offered me a job straight away and said, do you want to work in California or Slough? So I said, I think I want to work in California. And at that time, EA was really, really big on the Amiga. And as soon as I went, the Amiga market flopped in the United States. So, well, when I first went to EA, I was like the first audio person they had. So I wrote all the code on 8086 IBM, and I did all the music as well, until they started becoming the big, massive company that they are now.
So, when did you come back from the States, or what is the current status? You living now back in England, or?
Yeah, I'm back in England now. I live in Northumberland, midway between Newcastle and Scotland. I came back just after 9/11.
Okay, then there are some other projects guys wanted to ask from you. The C64 orchestra, does it ring bell to you? That's a project you collaborated with the real orchestra and Gerontel. What was your role in that project?
I was doing all the orchestration on that, and that was kind of more like a precursor to what we did in 2019 and 2020 with the full orchestra. So,
no, tell us in your own words, how does it feel to sit there and the orchestra is playing your Commodore music? What is the feeling?
Well, you know, it's just, it's like a dream come true, really, because as a musician, for you to sit down and then actually score for real people, real instruments, and a real orchestra is, you know, it's a dream come true. And I think that, you know, for me to get that opportunity is just fantastic, and it was just like a real high. I think 98.9% of musicians would probably donate one of their testicles to have such an opportunity. You know?
That's for sure, yeah.
You know. So, you know, to do that is, for me, to, you know, sit down there with a write a score out, score everything for a, you know, full string section, woodwind, brass, and have it actually played and put all that work in and have it realized is just, it's a dream come true.
Yeah, that might be a moment when you realize that the work you did back in the 80s,
Well-
it finally, finally, at least now it paid off.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. That's exactly what I felt about that, doing that.
Then there was a project called Project Hubbard. That was with Jason Page, Max Hall, and the C64audio.com. How was it for you, the project? How was it received, and are there any future projects coming on?
I think that is still a bit of an ongoing project with Chris Abbott. He's still doing stuff on that, I believe. We did some new SIDs, which, you know, was a varying kind of, I don't know, what's the word? Varying kind of a buzz, I would say, you know.
Okay, but is there a possibility that there would come one day totally new song from you, 100% done by Mr. Rob Hubbard?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I think that's what we wanted to hear. As long as there's hope, you know, life is worth living. But about the future in general, I guess you're retired now, and
Pretty much, yeah.
yeah, and
Apart from doing, you know, apart from the orchestral thing, which has been ongoing for about the last, you know, 5 or 6 years.
I was about to ask that how is music present in your life these days?
Yeah, music has always been pretty much part of my life, apart from, you know, I had a really down period towards the end of the 90s and early 2000s. I had a really kind of really down, bad period with it. But since doing the orchestral stuff again, I've kind of been getting back into it.
Okay, I think it's pretty much our time is full. Not yet, because we will have the section questions from the audience pretty soon. So prepare your questions. You will get the microphone and ask yourself. But in general, have you been to such demo scene parties? And if you have, when was it last time?
There's been a few things that I've been to. I went to Assembly in Helsinki that was quite a few years ago. And there's been a few other kind of more retro computer revival type things, of which I can't remember because it all stopped because of COVID, you know. So there's been quite a few of those things that I've been to. Most of which, I can't remember a lot of them. But.
Okay, but I think this is Commodore 64 only party. How much does Commodore 64 still mean to you?
Well, you know, obviously, if somebody asks me, you know, the C64 was always like, you know, a very personal thing to me because it was the best machine that was out there. And, you know, I mean, the other thing is, for me, I owe a great debt to the C64, because if it wasn't for the C64, you know, I would be still playing in crap clubs back in Singers, which is what I was doing before. So I owe, like, basically just about everything to the C64, which led to, you know, my involvement in the games business right up until somewhere around about 2010.
Have you been following what people do with the old breadbox machine these days?
No, not really. I mean, I've heard about some people doing crazy samples using a pulse width.
Okay, but you are going to stay tonight for the demo competition.
Yeah, yeah.
I really hope that, and I'm pretty sure that we will see something that will blow your mind too.
Oh yeah,
as well as mine.
I mean, a few years ago, I was at an Atari ST demo thing, which was at a place called Gulda, which is a really nice little place, and the thing that the graphics guys were doing on the Atari ST was pretty mind-blowing, considering. Yeah.
Get out.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you guys are Amiga fans. There's a couple of films called Bedroom to Billions, and one of them is the Amiga Years, which is a fantastic film. If you haven't seen it, you should see that, because it kind of conveys the entrepreneurial spirit of R.J. Michaels and Dave Needles and how they developed the Amiga and staying up all night tweaking, you know, to get that bouncing ball demo at the Las Vegas show. It's really, really cool.
Okay, but I think now it's time for the questions from the audience. Let's start from here, and control room big so that it doesn't start making any extra noises.
All right, so let's start with the fact that a lot of me and my friends, we all everything for 64, like all of our careers and everything, and you were a big part of that, so round of applause for that. All right. So the question, where was the last time you had something come out of the seed chip?
When was what?
When did you conjure something out of a seed?
Well, like I say, I think in the Commodore user manual, I think there's some like basic program in there where you start poking some things into to make a sound. That was like the very first thing that I did. Right. But before I had a C64, I had like synthesizers in the house. So I understood, you know, a whole lot of stuff about ADSRs and ring modulators and all that kind of thing. So when I read all this stuff about what the SID chip could do, I understood a lot of what all that terminology was all about.
Yeah, hi Rob. Question on, as a composer, do you have one single highlight in your composing career? Now let's forget about Commodore 64 or any platform, but as a composer, is there any highlight in your career? What is your finest composition from your own point of view?
Oh, God. That orchestral version that I did recently, with the expanded version of Monty on the Run with the orchestra, you know, because I had to get rid of that guitar section in the middle, and so I rewrote this whole other orchestral section. So I think that was pretty special. I don't know, I really like that thing that I did on Gold Runner. I did a very slow version just with string orchestra. And then I also wrote a piece recently which was called Revenge of the Pygmies, which was recorded. Which was a new piece that we did. That turned out pretty well.
Hey, Rob, great to have you here. I wondered if you were listening to the music competition yesterday, and if so, what was your general impression of the music presented yesterday? SID Music presented.
I think that SID Music has come a long way since the late 90s, and I think that a lot of the stuff is really, really cool these days. I think that a lot of it is really up-tempo, and it's very kind of electronic, and there's not many slower type of tunes. I think it's really, really difficult to write a slow tune on the SID chip because of the kind of very nature of what you have with the resources. It's really, really tough. And so people tend to go for the more kind of like techno electronic side because musically it's a lot easier to go in that vein than to write something very slow.
Okay, Rob, next one is coming from here.
Excited. This is one of the most special days in my C64 life. Just want you to know. And I have indeed a question. Did some of the modern game developers approach you to make music for a game, and when can we hear it?
No, the modern game business now is just nothing like it ever used to be, and everything kind of changed round about towards the end of the 90s, and I think that composers in the game business these days, they all compete each other. They have to do a demo and submit a demo and then try to undercut each other to get a bid for the job. So from that point of view, I'm not really that interested in doing something for any of the game companies.
Okay, next question. Trap.
Oh, thanks. Thank you for all the music, Rob.
Okay.
Love you. We're just having a discussion here. So, and I asked Andreas here, who do you think Rob would think, looking back today, back in the day, was the better musician of all you C64 composers?
Well, that's a tough question because, in all honesty, at some point, I really wasn't aware of like what the other people were doing. I mean, I knew what in the earlier days, I knew what Martin Galway was doing because I really liked some of his stuff, like Rambo, some of the other stuff he did, and I knew some of the stuff that Ben was doing with Tony Crowther. But then, when I was getting really, really busy, I had no idea what the other people were doing because I was just so focused on spending my time trying to get my stuff, done. So, what's the guy's name? Like Paul Norman, I had no idea what he was doing, and Mark Cooksey, I had no idea what I couldn't even name a game what he's done, or Fred Gray, I had no idea. So it's very difficult for me to answer that because I really wasn't paying that much attention to what was actually going on because I was too busy, trying to meet my deadlines. When can we have this shipped? Oh, I'll give it to you next week. Oh, okay, Can we have this by next Tuesday? Yeah, all right,
Okay, Rob, but maybe we have the answer. Who was the best in the 80s? Yeah, man, you owe me a beer. Okay, we still have time for a couple of questions. Let's go from here.
I hope it's not a too personal question, but you have 350 people here who still use C64 original hardware. Do you, in your private house, still have a C64?
No, one of my big regrets was that when I moved, I sold my C64 and all my games for about 50 quid or something, you know, and you know, in benefit of hindsight, man, I should have kept that, you know, because I've no idea how like certain tunes were supposed to sound, because the filters were different on the C64, you know, so some of these things would have sounded different. I wish I'd have kept that machine, man, you know. Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to the next one.
Hi.
Hi.
How much freedom you had creating music for games and composing music for games, or what kind of guidance generally was there from the game companies or publishers for what kind of music there should be in a given game?
How much freedom?
Yeah.
Well, in the early days, I could do what I wanted. You know, it was complete and utter, hey, we leave everything to you, you know. And that's why I tried to do something which was more appropriate for the genre. And then there was so much freedom that ended up doing all this crazy stuff to please the demo scene, you know. That's, you know. So I mean that's why things like Knuckle Busters, which is just completely insane. That's how that happened, you know. I had so much freedom to do all that stuff. And then, of course, when I went to EA, a lot of that freedom kind of disappeared, because then in America the scene was completely different, you know. You had to, if you're doing something for a sports game, it's got to sound like ESPN, you know, sports type thing.
Okay, still two more questions. One from here and one from Andreas. And then we'll close. So, let's go.
Hi Rob, nice that you're here. I wanted to ask you, if you had a time machine and you could go back to like 1985, 1986, what kind of advice would you give to your younger self? Are there any regrets about that time, or do you generally have a only positive outlook back on that?
No, I think that I certainly don't have any regrets for that. And if I could go back, I mean, I would probably just say, man, quit smoking. But you know, like I say, I owe everything to for that period of my life, which basically led to everything that I have, and you know, led me to doing the orchestral stuff and everything else. I don't have any regrets apart from, you know, too much smoking, a bit too much of that, and you know, a bit, you know.
Okay, and then it's time for the final last question, and then let's see what happens.
Rob, it's fantastic to see you here again. It's been too many years. Okay, so the question you mentioned briefly about CompuNet and big bills, telephone bills, and you briefly mentioned Linda, your then girlfriend, right? So can you please tell everybody, because you were working on so many platforms, how she helped you back in those days? And in fact, was she the one that wrote the music? I'm just kidding. But how did she help you?
Yeah. No, I wasn't married at the time. We were living together, but I developed, like I say, a system where she would help me with the ports. So I had like this L-shaped kind of bench that I made. I can't remember ever making it at all, but I made this L-shaped kind of bench thing, I had 11 computers. So I had like Atari 800, Atari ST, dreadful Spectrum things. Even worse, a dreadful Amstrad. And I had a couple of Amigas, and I had a machine called the Einstein Tattoo, which was used, what I got from working with David Whittaker to help do the Z80 stuff. And what we used to do was, I had a system where I could get her to look at my C64 source code, the music data, and be able to translate that into a format which worked with all the AY chips, which was common to all those other machines, so that I would leave the house at like 7 o'clock, go and do the gig that I was doing in the club. I would get back home at 10:30 to 11 o'clock, and she'd have all this stuff done, so that all I had to do in the next day was to tweak all the envelopes and all that kind of stuff, and I would have like 4 ports done of this music, and then I would like knock up some sound effects, which was basically use the ones from the last game and give it a little tweak, because you couldn't do much with an AY chip, and I'd have all the ports done. So it was getting quite efficient at that time. But all the effort was still on the C64. All the, everything that went into kind of writing and making everything happen was all on the C64. It was never a case that I started to write something on like an Atari ST and then think, oh, that might sound good on a C64. It was never like that. It was always the C64 first.
Okay, guys, time is ticking and we need to stick to the timetable. But remember, you can meet and greet Rob downstairs at 5. But before that, it's time to give all your love and warm greetings to Mr. Rob Hubbard.